December 15, 1944. Rabaul, New Britain. The bombs fall like metal rain against the concrete walls of the Japanese medical facility. Dust clouds swirl through broken windows as the building shudders with each impact. In the dim light of the underground ward, 37 Japanese women in white nursing uniforms huddle together, their faces streaked with dirt and fear. Keiko Yamamoto presses her back against the cold stone wall, her hands trembling as she clutches a medical bag to her chest. At 24, she has already seen 2 years of war in the Pacific, but nothing has prepared her for this moment. The sound of American voices echoes through the corridors above, sharp, foreign, getting closer. "They will kill us all," whispers Nurse Tanaka, her voice barely audible above the settling debris. "We have heard the stories." Keiko closes her eyes. She thinks of her mother's letters, of the cherry blossoms in Kyoto, of the life she left behind to serve the emperor. She thinks of the propaganda posters showing American soldiers as demons with fangs and claws. She thinks of the small cyanide capsule hidden in the lining of her medical bag, the final honor her commanding officer had given each of them before disappearing into the jungle. Heavy boots thunder down the concrete steps. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness like swords. "Don't move. Hands up." The American soldiers appear like ghosts emerging from smoke, their weapons raised, their eyes scanning the huddled women with a mixture of caution and surprise. Keiko's fingers find the hidden capsule. One quick motion and it would all be over. No shame. No dishonor. No unknown fate at the hands of the enemy. But she hesitates. The lead soldier, a young man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, slowly lowers his rifle. He says something in English to his men, then turns back to the women. His voice is softer now, almost gentle. "Japanese? Nurses." Keiko nods, not trusting her voice. The soldier removes his helmet, revealing sandy hair and a face that looks impossibly young, younger than her brother who died at Guadalcanal. "My name is Sergeant Murphy," he says in broken Japanese. We help you." The words make no sense. Americans don't help. Americans destroy. 3 hours later, aboard the USS transport ship Mercy. Salt spray mists across the ship's deck as Keiko stands at the railing, her hands zip-tied behind her back for security protocol. The other women cluster nearby, their white uniforms now torn and stained, their faces hollow with exhaustion and disbelief. They are prisoners of war, a fate they never imagined they would survive to experience. Below deck, she can hear the sounds of American sailors going about their duties. Laughter. Music from a radio. The smell of cooking food that doesn't smell like the rice and dried fish they've survived on for months. "What will they do to us?" asks Nurse Sato, the youngest among them at 19. Her voice cracks with the question they all carry. Keiko watches the endless blue horizon. "I don't know." But she remembers the young sergeant's eyes. There had been something in them she hadn't expected, something that looked almost like compassion. It confuses her. It frightens her more than cruelty would have. A sailor approaches with a metal tray. On it are sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and small glass bottles filled with dark liquid. He sets the tray down and backs away, gesturing for them to eat. Keiko stares at the food. It looks foreign, almost artificial. The bread is too white, too soft. There are layers of meat and cheese thicker than anything she's seen in years. And the bottles? They fizz and bubble like some kind of chemical concoction. "It might be poisoned," whispers Nurse Tanaka. The sailor seems to understand their hesitation. He picks up one of the bottles, removes the cap with a sharp hiss, and takes a long drink. Then he takes a bite from one of the sandwiches, chewing slowly and deliberately, showing them it's safe. The hunger wins. Keiko reaches for a bottle with her bound hands, awkwardly maneuvering it to her lips. The liquid hits her tongue like liquid lightning, sweet, sharp, effervescent. It's unlike anything she's ever tasted. It's like drinking liquid joy, if such a thing were possible. The other women watch her face, waiting for some sign of poison or pain. Instead, Keiko's eyes widen with something approaching wonder. She takes another sip, then another. "What is it?" Sato asks. I don't know," Keiko admits. "But it's..." She can't finish the sentence. How do you describe magic to someone who has only known war? December 20, 1944. Camp Stockton, California. The train wheels clatter against steel rails as America scrolls past the windows like scenes from another world. Keiko presses her face to the glass, watching endless fields of green, cities that show no signs of bombing, people walking freely without fear of air raids. This is the enemy homeland. This is the place their propaganda described as a wasteland of moral decay and military weakness. But the houses look solid and comfortable. The people look well-fed. Children play in yards that have never known the sound of artillery. It doesn't look destroyed, murmurs Nurse Hayashi, voicing what they're all thinking. The train pulls into Camp Stockton as the sun sets behind the California mountains. The barbed wire and guard towers remind them they are prisoners, but even the prison camp looks impossibly organized and clean. American soldiers escort them from the train cars, but their treatment is firm rather than brutal. In the processing center they surrender their few possessions and receive new clothes, clean uniforms that smell of soap and something else, something fresh and American. They are assigned numbers, photographed, and given small cards with their information printed in both English and Japanese. Keiko stares at her prisoner identification card. Number 247,851. But below the number, in careful handwriting, someone has written her name in Japanese characters. Keiko Yamamoto. They took the time to write her name correctly. The barracks are simple but heated. Each woman receives a narrow bed with clean sheets, a pillow, and a wool blanket. After months of sleeping on concrete floors and bamboo mats, the softness feels like luxury. That first night, lying in the darkness listening to the quiet breathing of her fellow prisoners, Keiko thinks about the fizzy drink on the ship. She thinks about the careful handwriting on her identification card. She thinks about the young sergeant's gentle voice when he said they would help. Nothing makes sense anymore. January 8, 1945. Camp Mess Hall. The food line moves slowly, each woman holding a metal tray, following the routine they've learned over the past few weeks. American soldiers serve the meals, portions larger than anything they received even before the war began. The meat is real meat, not the scraps and substitutes they've grown accustomed to. The vegetables are fresh and colorful. But today is different. Today, one of the kitchen workers places something new on Keiko's tray, a sandwich unlike the ones from the ship. This one is different, assembled fresh with layers of beef, lettuce, tomato, and cheese between two soft bun halves. Steam rises from it in the cold morning air. Hamburger, says the soldier, pronouncing the English word slowly. American food. Keiko carries her tray to the table where the other nurses sit. They examine their identical sandwiches with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The proportions seem excessive, almost wasteful. In Japan, such quantities of meat would feed a family for days. She takes her first bite. The flavors explode across her palate. Rich, salty, savory, with texture she's never experienced. The meat is tender and juicy. The vegetables are crisp and fresh. The cheese melts slightly from the warmth of the cooked beef. Nurse Sato watches Keiko's face intently. What does it taste like? Keiko chews slowly, trying to process the experience. It tastes like abundance, she finally says. It tastes like they have so much food they can afford to put it all in one sandwich. Around the mess hall, other prisoners eat quietly, but Keiko notices something else. American soldiers eat the same food. The same hamburgers, the same portions, the same drinks. They're not eating different, better food while giving scraps to the prisoners. They're sharing their own meals. This realization hits her like a physical blow. At Rabaul, the Japanese officers ate rice and fish while the nurses survived on watery soup and dried seaweed. Here the captors eat the same food as their captives. After lunch, she approaches one of the guards, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair who speaks a few words of Japanese. Why? She asks, gesturing toward the mess hall. Why same food? The guard considers her question seriously. Geneva Convention, he says in English, then struggles to find the Japanese words. Rules, for war prisoners. Must treat, good. Keiko nods, but she doesn't really understand. Rules for treating prisoners well? Such concepts exist? That afternoon, during their permitted exercise time in the yard, she walks the perimeter of the camp, studying the fence, the guard towers, the patterns of the soldiers' movements. Not planning escape, she knows that's impossible. But trying to understand this place, these people who capture them and then feed them better than their own military ever did. February 14, 1945. Camp Library. The room is small but bright, with windows that let in the California sunshine and shelves lined with books in both English and Japanese. Keiko runs her fingers along the spines of familiar titles. Classic literature, poetry, even some nursing textbooks. The Americans have somehow acquired Japanese books and made them available to the prisoners. She selects a volume of Basho's poetry and settles into one of the wooden chairs. The familiar words transport her back to her childhood, to school days and peaceful afternoons before the world went mad. A shadow falls across her page. She looks up to see a young American woman in a Red Cross uniform, holding a clipboard and wearing a kind smile. "I'm sorry to interrupt," the woman says in careful, accented Japanese. My name is Helen Morrison. I'm with the Red Cross. I was hoping to speak with you about writing letters home. Keiko sets down the book. Letters home. To your family in Japan. To let them know you're alive and well. The offer seems impossible. We can write to our families? Helen nods. It's part of the Geneva Convention. Prisoners of war have the right to correspond with their families. The letters are censored, of course, but you can tell them you're safe. Keiko stares at this American woman who speaks Japanese and offers to help Japanese prisoners contact their families. In the 2 years since she left home, she hasn't been able to send a single letter to her mother. The military censors rarely allowed personal correspondence, and when they did, the soldiers' letters took priority. My mother, Keiko says quietly, she thinks I'm dead. Helen's expression softens. Then let's change that. They spend the next hour composing a letter. Helen helps with the proper formal language and explains what topics are permitted. Keiko writes about the weather, about her health, about small daily details that will reassure her mother without revealing military information. She doesn't write about the hamburgers or the Coca-Cola or the American soldiers who treat her with unexpected kindness. How could she explain things she doesn't understand herself? As she seals the letter, Helen mentions casually, "We've been getting some letters from Japan for prisoners here. I'll check to see if there are any for you." The possibility that her mother might have written, that letters might have been traveling across the Pacific looking for her, makes Keiko's heart race with hope and terror. March 2, 1945. Camp Medical Ward. The American military doctor, Captain Richardson, examines Nurse Yamamoto's chart with the same professional attention he would give to any patient. She has been working in the camp's medical facility for 3 weeks now, assisting with both American and Japanese patients, and her skill has not gone unnoticed. Your English is improving rapidly, he observes as they review the morning's cases together. Keiko nods. The daily exposure to English has forced her to learn quickly, and several of the American staff have been patient teachers. Necessary for work, she replies. More than necessary. You have a natural aptitude for languages and medicine both. They move to the next bed where a young American soldier recovers from appendicitis. He smiles when he sees Keiko and she returns the greeting in English. Morning, Nurse Keiko. How's the soup today? Very good soup, she replies, adjusting his pillow. You eat all. After they finish rounds, Captain Richardson asks her to join him in his office. The room is sparse but comfortable, with photographs of his family on the desk, a wife and 2 young children smiling from a frame. I've been thinking about your situation, he begins. When the war ends, and it will end, you'll need to make some decisions about your future. Keiko sits quietly, unsure where this conversation is leading. The Red Cross has programs for displaced persons. Training programs. There might be opportunities for someone with your skills and language abilities. Opportunities? To stay in America if you choose. To continue your medical training. To start a new life. The words hang in the air like smoke. Stay in America? The idea seems impossible, almost treasonous. But as she sits in this warm office, looking at pictures of an American family, eating food that tastes of abundance, the impossibility feels less absolute than it once did. My family is in Japan, she says finally. Captain Richardson nods. Of course. I'm not suggesting you make any decisions now. I'm just saying that when the time comes, you'll have choices. That evening, lying in her bunk, Keiko stares at the ceiling and thinks about choices. For her entire life, her path has been determined by others. By her parents, by her teachers, by the military, by the war itself. The idea that she might have actual choices about her future is more foreign than hamburgers and Coca-Cola. April 10, 1945. Camp Recreation Room. The radio crackles with static as the American soldiers adjust the antenna, trying to find a clear signal. When the news broadcast comes through, the room falls silent. Even though it's in English, Keiko understands enough words to grasp the meaning. President Roosevelt is dead. She watches the faces of the American soldiers and staff, sees the genuine grief and shock in their expressions. Some of them are crying. These tough military men are crying over their dead leader like children who have lost a father. In Japan, she remembers, people were taught to cry when the emperor spoke, but it always felt performed, required. This grief is different, spontaneous, personal, real. One of the guards, Sergeant Martinez, sits heavily in a chair and puts his head in his hands. He's been kind to the Japanese prisoners, always greeting them politely, sometimes sharing photographs of his own family back in Texas. Without thinking, Keiko approaches him. I am sorry, she says in careful English. He looks up, surprised. Thank you, Nurse Keiko. That means a lot. "He was good man?" she asks. Sergeant Martinez nods. "The best. He brought us through the depression, through this war. He was." He struggles to find words that she might understand. "He was our father." Keiko nods. She understands the concept of a leader as father, but this feels different from the distant, divine figure of the emperor. This feels personal, human. Later that evening, she finds herself thinking about the differences between the Japan she left and the America she's discovered. In Japan, they were taught to die for the emperor, to sacrifice everything for his glory. In America, it seems the leaders are expected to sacrifice for the people. The distinction troubles her in ways she cannot fully articulate. May 8, 1945. V-Day. The celebration in the camp is muted but genuine. Europe is free, the radio announces Hitler is dead, the war there is over. The American soldiers seem relieved rather than jubilant. One front finished, one enemy defeated, but the Pacific War continues. Keiko and the other Japanese prisoners watch the modest festivities from their barracks windows. Sergeant Martinez has given them extra recreation time, and some of the guards have shared cookies and small treats from care packages sent from home. But underneath the celebration, Keiko senses a change in the atmosphere. With Europe secure, she knows the full weight of American military power will now turn toward Japan. The war that brought her here is approaching its climax, and she doesn't know what that means for her fellow prisoners, or for her homeland. That afternoon, Helen Morrison from the Red Cross visits with news that changes everything. "I have a letter for you," she says, holding out an envelope with familiar handwriting. Keiko's hands shake as she accepts the letter from her mother. The paper feels impossibly precious, a tangible connection across thousands of miles and months of separation. The letter is short, written in formal language designed to pass censors, but between the careful words, Keiko reads volumes of love, worry, and hope. Her mother is alive. Her younger sister is working in a factory. Food is scarce, but they are surviving. They pray for her safety every day. And then, in the final paragraph, a line that stops her heart. "Your brother Hiroshi was reported missing near Okinawa. We have received no further word." Keiko folds the letter carefully and holds it against her chest. Her brother, 2 years younger, always the dreamer, always the one who wanted to see the world beyond their small village. Now he is missing somewhere in the Pacific, probably fighting against the same American forces that captured her. The war suddenly feels personal again in a way it hasn't since her capture. These kind American soldiers, these guards who share their food and treat her with respect, are fighting against her brother, might have been the ones who... She cannot finish the thought. June 15, 1945. Camp Commander's Office. Colonel Bradley reviews the files spread across his desk. Medical records, behavioral assessments, language proficiency reports for each of the Japanese prisoners. The women have been model prisoners, causing no trouble, contributing meaningfully to the camp's operations, particularly in the medical facilities. He calls in Keiko Yamamoto, prisoner 247851, who has emerged as an informal leader among the group. "Nurse Yamamoto," he begins in English, knowing she now understands well enough to follow the conversation. "I've been reviewing your records. Your contributions here have been exemplary." Keiko stands at attention, unsure how to respond. "At ease," Colonel Bradley says gently. "This isn't disciplinary. I wanted to discuss the future with you." He explains that the war in the Pacific is likely to end within months. Intelligence reports suggest Japanese resistance is weakening. When that happens, decisions will need to be made about repatriation, sending prisoners back to Japan. However, he continues, there may be alternatives for those who prefer them. The Red Cross has programs. The U.S. government is considering expanded immigration opportunities for displaced persons who have demonstrated valuable skills and good character. Keiko listens carefully, translating the formal language in her head. "Are you asking if I want to stay in America?" she asks finally. Colonel Bradley nods. "I'm asking you to think about it. You have time. But when the moment comes for decisions, I want you to know that you have earned the right to choose." That night, Keiko writes another letter to her mother, carefully worded to pass the censors. She writes about her health, about the weather, about small daily activities. She doesn't write about choices and futures and the possibility that she might never return to Japan. How do you explain to your mother that you're considering abandoning everything you were raised to believe? July 28, 1945. Camp Mess Hall evening meal. The routine has become comfortable, almost domestic. Keiko moves through the food line, exchanges greetings with the kitchen staff in her improving English, receives her hamburger and the bottle of Coca-Cola that has become as familiar as rice once was. She sits with nurses Sato and Hayashi, the three of them having formed a close friendship during their months of captivity. They speak in Japanese, but their conversation is peppered with English words they've absorbed. Hamburger, okay, thank you, good morning. I received another letter from home, Sato says quietly. My father is very ill. My mother needs help with the farm. Keiko nods sympathetically. They all carry the weight of family obligations, the pull of duty and tradition calling them back to Japan. What will you do when the war ends? Ayashi asks. It's the question they all avoid, but it lurks beneath every conversation now. The war news suggests the end is coming soon. American bombers are pounding Japanese cities daily. The casualties must be enormous. I don't know, Keiko admits. Colonel Bradley says we can choose. Choose what? To stay. To become American. The words sound strange in Japanese, almost meaningless. How does one choose to become something completely different? Sato takes a sip of her Coca-Cola and makes a face. After months, she still finds the sweetness overwhelming. Can you imagine explaining this to our families? I chose to stay in America and drink this fizzy poison instead of coming home to take care of you. They laugh, but the humor is bitter. The choice between duty and desire, between the familiar and the unknown, between the life they were born to live and the life they might choose to create. August 6, 1945. 8:47 a.m. Pacific Time. The radio in Colonel Bradley's office carries the news across the camp within minutes. A single American bomb has destroyed the entire city of Hiroshima. The reports are confused, contradictory, but the scale of destruction is unlike anything previously imagined. Keiko sits in the medical ward, her hands trembling as she tries to process bandages. Hiroshima. She has cousins in Hiroshima. Her nursing school classmate Michiko took a position at a hospital there 2 years ago. One bomb. An entire city. The American staff move through their duties with subdued efficiency, but she can see the shock in their faces too. Even they seem stunned by the magnitude of what their country has done. Captain Richardson finds her during lunch break, sitting alone outside the medical building, staring at the California mountains. Are you all right? He asks. She looks up at him, this kind American doctor who has treated her as a colleague and friend. My cousin, she says in careful English. In Hiroshima. I don't know. He sits beside her on the bench, violating protocol but not caring. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They sit in silence for a long time. Finally, Keiko speaks. Will Japan surrender now? Captain Richardson considers his answer carefully. I think so. I hope so. This war has gone on too long. What happens to us then? I don't know. But whatever happens, you'll be taken care of. I promise you that. It's a promise he has no authority to make, but Keiko finds comfort in it anyway. After months of experiencing American kindness, she believes he means it. August 9, 1945. Camp Recreation Room. The second bomb falls on Nagasaki. The radio reports are clearer this time, more detailed, more horrifying. Another city erased from existence in a flash of light and heat. Keiko and the other Japanese prisoners gather in the recreation room, holding each other, crying for their homeland, for the families they may have lost, for the world that is ending around them. Some of the American guards stand at the edges of the room, their faces grim, unsure whether their presence is welcome or intrusive. Sergeant Martinez approaches slowly. We've received word that you can send additional letters home, he announces quietly. Uncensored. To find out about your families. The offer of uncensored communication, something that would have been unthinkable weeks ago, demonstrates how completely the situation has changed. The war is ending, and with it, many of the rules that govern their captivity. Keiko writes frantically to her mother, to her uncle in Kyoto, to anyone who might respond with news of survivors, of damage, of what remains of the Japan she left behind. But even as she writes, she realizes she's writing to a country that may no longer exist, to a world that has been fundamentally transformed by forces beyond anyone's control. August 15, 1945. 3:30 p.m. The Emperor's voice crackles through the radio speakers, transmitted from Tokyo to be rebroadcast around the world. His words are formal, archaic, difficult to understand even for native Japanese speakers, but the meaning is unmistakable. Japan surrenders. The war is over. Keiko stands with the other prisoners in the camp's main hall, listening to the voice of the man they were taught to revere as a living god announcing Japan's defeat. The Emperor's words speak of enduring the unendurable, of bearing the unbearable, of accepting occupation by foreign forces. Around them, American soldiers and staff maintain respectful silence, understanding that they are witnessing a sacred and terrible moment for the Japanese prisoners. When the broadcast ends, the silence stretches endlessly. Finally, Nurse Sato begins to weep, not the quiet tears of grief but deep, wrenching sobs that seem to come from her soul. Others join her. Not all. Some stand stoic, processing the news with the discipline of their military training. But enough weep that the sound fills the hall like a lament. Keiko finds herself dry-eyed, numb, trying to comprehend what this means. The war that defined her entire adult life is over. The cause for which she left home, for which her brother probably died, for which she was prepared to die herself, has been lost. Everything she believed about strength, about honor, about the inevitable victory of the Japanese spirit, has been proven wrong. And yet, standing in this American prison camp, well-fed and well-treated, surrounded by enemies who have shown her more kindness than her own military ever did, she cannot say she feels entirely defeated. August 20, 1945. Colonel Bradley's office. The repatriation orders have arrived from Washington. All Japanese prisoners of war are to be returned to Japan as soon as transport can be arranged. The process will take months. There are thousands of prisoners scattered across camps throughout the United States, but the directive is clear. Colonel Bradley studies the papers, then looks at the Japanese woman sitting across from his desk. In the months since her capture, Nurse Yamamoto has become more than just another prisoner. She has become a bridge between two worlds, a translator not just of language but of understanding. The orders are to send all of you home, he says directly. Keiko nods. She expected this. However, he continues, there are provisions for special cases. Medical personnel who have made significant contributions to American military operations. Individuals who have demonstrated exceptional cooperation and skill. He slides a form across the desk. It's in English, but she's learned enough to understand the essential words. Application for permanent resident status. This would allow you to remain in the United States legally. To continue your medical training. To build a life here if that's what you choose. Keiko stares at the form. The choice that has been theoretical for months is now real, immediate, documented in official paperwork. How long do I have to decide? 2 weeks. The first transport ships leave for Japan in early September. 2 weeks to choose between everything she's ever known and everything she's discovered about herself during these months of captivity. August 27, 1945. Camp Letter Writing Room. 3 letters from Japan have arrived in the past week, and they paint a picture of devastation that exceeds even Keiko's worst fears. Her mother's village has survived physically, but food shortages are severe and getting worse. American occupation forces are arriving, bringing their own uncertainties. Her cousin in Hiroshima is confirmed dead, along with most of that side of the family. Her brother Hiroshi remains missing, presumed dead. Japan is not just defeated, it is broken, traumatized, occupied by foreign forces, struggling to survive. Keiko reads and rereads the letters, trying to reconcile the desperate situation they describe with her duty to return home and help rebuild. Her mother needs her. Her country needs everyone who survived. But she also thinks about Captain Richardson's offer to help her continue her medical training. About the research opportunities he's mentioned. About the possibility of becoming not just a nurse but a doctor. Something that would be nearly impossible for a woman in traditional Japanese society. She picks up her pen to write a response to her mother, then sets it down again. How do you explain in a letter that you're considering abandoning your family and country in their hour of greatest need? September 3, 1945. Camp Transportation Depot. The first group of Japanese prisoners boards the trucks that will take them to ships bound for Japan. Nurse Sato is among them, clutching a small bag of personal belongings and wearing the same white nursing uniform she was captured in, now clean and mended. She embraces Keiko fiercely. "Come home soon," she whispers. "Japan needs people like you." Keiko nods, not trusting her voice. She watches her friend climb into the truck, watches the other women who have chosen repatriation gather their few possessions and prepare for the journey back to uncertainty. 18 of the original 37 are leaving today. The others have requested delays for various reasons. Medical issues, family inquiries, bureaucratic complications. But Keiko knows that several, like herself, are simply buying time to make an impossible decision. As the trucks disappear down the dusty road, Keiko feels a profound loneliness settle over her. The community that sustained her through months of captivity is dissolving, scattering across the Pacific, probably never to be reunited. Helen Morrison from the Red Cross approaches with news that changes everything once again. "I've received word about your brother," she says gently. Keiko's heart stops. She has been afraid to hope, afraid to despair. "He's alive." He was captured at Okinawa and is being held at a camp in Hawaii. He'll be repatriated with the next group. Hiroshi is alive. Her baby brother, the dreamer, has survived the war just as she has. The relief is overwhelming, but it's followed immediately by a crushing realization. If she stays in America, she may never see him again. September 10, 1945. Camp Medical Ward Night Shift. Keiko works the late shift, checking on patients, updating charts, assisting with a minor emergency surgery on an American soldier who was injured in a training accident. The familiar routines of medical care ground her, give her hands something to do while her mind wrestles with the decision that grows more urgent each day. Captain Richardson joins her in the recovery room, ostensibly to check on his patient but really to continue a conversation they've been having in fragments for weeks. "Have you made your decision?" he asks quietly. "I think so," Keiko replies, not looking up from the chart she's updating. "My family needs me. My brother is alive, he'll be going home soon. My mother is alone and struggling." Captain Richardson nods. "Those are good reasons. But not the only reasons." She sets down her pen and looks at him directly. "If I stay, what would I become? Not Japanese anymore, but never really American either. Always foreign, always explaining myself, always between two worlds." "That's possible," he admits. "It wouldn't be easy. And if I go back, I return to a Japan that no longer exists. Everything I left behind has been destroyed or changed. The Japan in my memory is gone forever." They stand in comfortable silence, watching the sleeping soldier, listening to the night sounds of the camp, quiet conversations from the guards, the distant hum of radio broadcasts, the soft breathing of patients in recovery. "Can I tell you something?" Captain Richardson says finally. Keiko nods. "When this war started, I was absolutely certain we were fighting pure evil. The stories we heard about Japanese brutality, the way prisoners were treated, the fanaticism we encountered, it seemed clear that we were dealing with people who had lost their humanity." He pauses, choosing his words carefully. "Working with you and the other nurses has changed that understanding. Not the facts about the war, those atrocities did happen. But my understanding of what it means to be human in impossible circumstances." Keiko looks at him questioningly. "You've shown me that even enemies can become friends when they're given the chance to know each other as individuals rather than as representatives of opposing causes. Is that why you want me to stay? As proof that friendship is possible?" Captain Richardson shakes his head. "I want you to stay because you've become a better doctor than most of the men I've trained with. Because you have gifts that could help a lot of people, regardless of their nationality. But those are my reasons, not yours." He turns to face her fully. "The only reason that matters is what will allow you to live with yourself for the rest of your life." September 15, 1945. Final decision day. The application form sits on the small table in Keiko's barracks, unsigned, while she stares out the window at the California mountains that have become familiar over these months of captivity. In 3 days, the final transport ship will depart for Japan. If she doesn't submit the application today, the choice will be made for her. She thinks about her mother's last letter, written in careful characters that revealed the writer's hunger and exhaustion. She thinks about her brother Hiroshi, probably in a prison camp much like this one, preparing for his own journey home to a Japan he won't recognize. She thinks about the taste of Hamburgers and Coca-Cola, about Colonel Bradley's kindness, about the possibility of becoming a doctor in a country where such dreams might be achievable for a woman. She thinks about duty and honor and family obligation, concepts that were absolute truths just months ago but now seem more complex, more negotiable. Finally, she picks up her pen and begins to write. Not on the application form, but on a piece of personal stationery Helen Morrison gave her. A letter to her mother that will try to explain the unexplainable. Honored Mother. By the time you receive this letter, I will be on a ship crossing the Pacific Ocean. I am coming home to Japan, to you, to whatever remains of the life we knew before the war. I have been offered the opportunity to remain in America, to continue my medical training, to build a new life in this strange country that has treated me with unexpected kindness. For weeks I have struggled with this decision, torn between my duty to family and country and my desire for the possibilities that America might offer. But I have realized that some choices are not really choices at all. I am Japanese. I am your daughter. I am part of a family and a culture that shaped me long before this war began. Whatever America might offer me, it cannot offer me the chance to be who I truly am. The Americans have been good to me. They have fed me better than our own military ever did. They have treated me with respect and kindness. They have shown me that even enemies can find common ground when they see each other as human beings rather than as threats. But I am not American and I never will be. My place is with you, helping to rebuild what was lost, caring for the people who need me most. I will bring with me the memory of Hamburgers and Coca-Cola, of American efficiency and kindness, of possibilities I never imagined. These memories will not make me less Japanese, but they will make me a different kind of Japanese than I was before. Perhaps that is what our country needs now. People who have seen other ways of living and can help us rebuild with wisdom gained from unexpected places. I'm coming home, Mother. Not to the Japan I left, and not as the person I was when I left, but home nonetheless. Your devoted daughter, Keiko. She seals the letter and places it in the outgoing mail. Then she picks up the unsigned application form, holds it for a long moment and quietly tears it in half. September 18, 1945. USS transport ship homeward, Pacific Ocean. The ship cuts through gray Pacific swells, carrying 847 former Japanese prisoners of war back to their homeland. Keiko stands at the stern, watching the American coastline disappear into the haze, holding a small bag that contains her few possessions and a letter of recommendation from Captain Richardson that might help her find work in occupied Japan. Beside her, other repatriated prisoners maintain their own silent vigils. Some weep quietly. Others seem determined to show no emotion at all. A few, like Keiko, simply watch and remember. The ship's mess serves American food: hamburgers, hot dogs, sandwiches with white bread and processed cheese. Some of the returning prisoners refuse to eat it, as if consuming American food might somehow contaminate them as they prepare to return to Japan. Others eat eagerly, knowing it may be the last abundant meal they'll have for a long time. Keiko eats one final hamburger, slowly, thoughtfully, trying to memorize the taste. She drinks one last bottle of Coca-Cola, savoring the fizzy sweetness that once seemed so foreign and now feels almost familiar. Tomorrow they will dock in Yokohama. Tomorrow she will see what remains of Japan, what the war has done to her homeland, what occupation by former enemies means in practical terms. But tonight, sailing across the dark Pacific under unfamiliar stars, she allows herself to remember the kindness of Sergeant Martinez, the medical expertise of Captain Richardson, the gentle bureaucracy of Helen Morrison, and the impossible generosity of a country that fed its prisoners the same food it gave its own soldiers. She has chosen her path and she believes it's the right one. But she will carry with her forever the knowledge that other paths were possible, that even in war, even between enemies, unexpected grace can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. September 19, 1945. Yokohama Harbor, Japan. Dawn. The ship docks as the sun rises over Yokohama Bay, revealing a cityscape that barely exists anymore. Buildings are flattened or skeletal. The harbor is filled with the rusted hulks of sunken ships. American military vehicles and personnel are everywhere, managing the massive operation of repatriating thousands of prisoners and beginning the complex process of occupying a defeated nation. Keiko joins the long line of returning prisoners waiting to disembark. They move slowly, processing through American checkpoints, receiving temporary identification papers, being sorted and directed toward transportation that will take them to their home prefectures. When her turn comes, the American processing officer, a tired-looking young man with kind eyes, stamps her papers and wishes her luck in careful Japanese. Even here, even in this chaotic moment of transition, the American soldiers maintain their unexpected courtesy. A Japanese official, working under American supervision, directs her toward a train that will take her to Kyoto. The train itself is a relic, overcrowded and underpowered, nothing like the efficient transportation she remembers from before the war. As the train pulls away from Yokohama, carrying her toward whatever remains of home, Keiko presses her face to the window and watches the devastated landscape scroll past. Cities reduced to ash and rubble. Rice fields turned into landing strips for American aircraft. Endless lines of refugees walking along roads that lead nowhere and everywhere. This is the Japan she chose to come back to, broken, occupied, struggling to survive. But it's still Japan. It's still home. 3 hours later. Kyoto Station. Her mother waits on the platform, smaller and frielier than Keiko remembered, her hair white instead of black, her face etched with lines that weren't there 2 years ago. But her eyes are the same, and when she sees Keiko stepping off the train, those eyes fill with tears of relief and joy that transcend all the suffering the war has brought. They embrace without words, holding each other as if to confirm that both are real, both are alive, both have somehow survived the madness that destroyed so much of their world. Finally, her mother steps back and studies her daughter's face with the intensity of someone who has wondered for months whether they would ever see each other again. "You look different," she says quietly. Keiko nods. "I am different. Tell me." And so, as they walk slowly through the streets of Kyoto, Past buildings that show bomb damage, past American military patrols, past the visible signs of occupation and defeat, Keiko begins to tell her mother about Hamburgers and Coca-Cola, about American doctors who treated her as a colleague, about prison camps that were more comfortable than military bases, about enemies who showed unexpected kindness to their captives. Her mother listens without judgment, understanding that her daughter has returned from a war that changed everything, including the people who fought it. "Will you stay now?" her mother asks as they reach the small house that somehow survived the bombing. "Yes," Keiko says, but then adds, "but I will never forget what I learned there." That evening, sitting in her childhood home, eating rice and vegetables that taste thin and unsatisfying after months of American abundance, Keiko begins to understand the complexity of the choice she has made. She is home, but home is not the same place she left. She is Japanese, but she is no longer the same kind of Japanese she was before her capture. She has rejected the opportunity to become American, but she has been changed by America in ways that will last forever. 6 months later. Kyoto General Hospital Medical Ward. Dr. Keiko Yamamoto, she completed her medical degree through an accelerated program designed for qualified nurses, makes her morning rounds through wards filled with patients suffering from malnutrition, disease, and the lingering effects of bombing trauma. The hospital is chronically understaffed and undersupplied, operating under the oversight of American occupation authorities who are struggling to rebuild Japan's shattered medical system. Many of the older doctors cannot adapt to the new realities, but Keiko moves easily between the Japanese staff and the American supervisors, translating not just language but perspective. Her experience in the American prison camp has become an unexpected asset. She understands American medical procedures and equipment. She can communicate effectively with the occupation authorities. Most importantly, she can imagine possibilities beyond the traditional limitations that constrained medicine in pre-war Japan. Today she is supervising the installation of new American-made medical equipment, machines that were unimaginable luxuries before the war but are becoming standard tools of modern medicine. The irony is not lost on her. Japan is being rebuilt with American technology by people who were recently enemies. During her lunch break, she sits in the hospital courtyard with a simple meal of rice and fish, thinking about the letter she received last week from Captain Richardson. He is back in civilian practice in California but maintains correspondence with several of the former prisoners who chose repatriation. His letter mentioned that he has established a small scholarship fund for Japanese medical students who want to study in America. It's a modest program, but it represents something larger. The possibility that the connections formed during the war might evolve into lasting bridges between former enemies. He has invited her to apply for the program when she feels ready to consider returning to America temporarily for advanced training. Keiko folds the letter carefully and places it back in her pocket. Not yet, she thinks. There is too much work to be done here, too many people who need her skills in this wounded country. But someday perhaps. When Japan is stronger, when her mother is older and needs less care, when the immediate crisis has passed and she can think beyond simple survival. The taste of hamburgers and Coca-Cola has long since faded from her memory, but the larger lesson remains. The world is more complex and more interconnected than any war can ultimately destroy. Enemies can become friends. Former captors can become colleagues. The boundaries between nations are real, but the connections between individuals transcend those boundaries in ways that give hope for the future. 5 years later. 1950. International Medical Conference, Tokyo. Dr. Keiko Yamamoto stands at the podium addressing an audience of Japanese and American medical professionals gathered for the first joint medical conference since the end of the war. Her presentation focuses on trauma care techniques she developed by combining traditional Japanese medicine with American surgical procedures she learned during her imprisonment. In the audience, she can see several familiar faces. Captain Richardson, now Dr. Richardson, who made the journey from California specifically to attend her presentation. Sergeant Martinez, who became a medical technician after the war and is now studying advanced techniques in Japan. Even Helen Morrison from the Red Cross, now working with international refugee organizations. The war that brought them together as captors and captive has evolved into professional relationships that span the Pacific. Former enemies have become colleagues, collaborators in the work of healing. After her presentation, during the reception, Dr. Richardson approaches with a smile. "That was excellent work," he says. "You've developed some techniques that we could really use in American hospitals." "Perhaps," Keiko replies, "it's time to think about that scholarship program you mentioned." They stand together in the modern conference hall, surrounded by the quiet conversations of medical professionals from two countries that were recently at war, planning collaborative research that will benefit patients regardless of nationality. Outside, Tokyo is rebuilding itself into something new. Not the same city that was destroyed by American bombs, but not a foreign creation either. Something uniquely Japanese but informed by contact with the wider world. Keiko thinks about choices and paths not taken, about hamburgers and Coca-Cola and the strange ways that war can lead to understanding. She chose to come home to Japan, and she has never regretted that decision. But she is no longer the same person who made that choice, and Japan is not the same country she returned to. Perhaps that's the real lesson of her war experience. That people and nations can be transformed by contact with former enemies without losing their essential identity. The key is remaining open to the possibility that yesterday's adversary might become tomorrow's ally, that the boundaries we draw between us and them are more fluid than we imagine. She excuses herself from the reception and steps outside into the Tokyo evening. The city lights stretch to the horizon, a prosperous, peaceful vista that would have been unimaginable during the dark days of 1945. In her purse, she carries the business card of an American medical research institute that has offered her a position developing international exchange programs for medical professionals. It's an opportunity to spend part of each year in both countries, building bridges between the medical communities that saved her life and gave her purpose. She thinks about her mother, now elderly but proud of her daughter's success. She thinks about her brother Hiroshi, who returned from his own imprisonment to become a teacher, dedicated to ensuring that future generations understand both the costs of war and the possibilities of peace. She thinks about the taste of hamburgers and Coca-Cola, no longer strange flavors from a foreign world but simply foods associated with a complex period of her life when she learned that even enemies can show unexpected kindness. The war ended more than 5 years ago, but its lessons continue to unfold in ways she could never have anticipated when she stood in that bombed hospital in Rabaul, clutching a cyanide capsule and preparing to die rather than surrender. Instead, she chose to live. She chose to learn. She chose to build something new from the rubble of what was destroyed. And standing in the rebuilt streets of Tokyo, surrounded by the lights of a city that refused to accept defeat as final, she understands that sometimes the most important choice is simply to remain open to possibilities you never imagined. That day in the American prison camp, she learned that hamburgers and Coca-Cola were not weapons of cultural destruction, but simple offerings of shared humanity from people who could have chosen cruelty but chose kindness instead. The war taught her to fight. The peace taught her to build. And in the end, she discovered, building is always more difficult and more important than destroying, but also more rewarding than she ever dared to hope.